to be in this anthology. It's great, and it's great. It's for such a good cause, and it helped many of us vent. I'm going to begin by reading a piece not my own in the anthology. I guess this is okay, even though it's staring at me. This is a piece by a woman called Achille Bejas, who's a wonderful activist, poet, prose writer, who I was fortunate enough to, she's good. I was fortunate enough to teach when she was getting her MFA many, many years ago. And she's really terrific. So I'm going to read her piece first. And her piece is actually a bit longer than mine. Her piece is called The March. I am about to step outside. I am about to step outside to the elements, and my anticipation is a long inhalation that covers the world upon release. This is the beginning of a movement based on facts and not on sentiment or pronouncements, though both sentiment and pronouncements are useful and worthy. As I begin to lift my left foot, my sartorius muscle allows my knee to move up toward my body. I am joined by others, however they can join with me, others who have suffered too, and are not afraid to continue suffering. What we seek is a new majority rooted in justice for all, whose conscience is committed to ceasing wrongs and doing right. What we want is nothing about us without us. What we want is for each individual to define their own identity and expect that society will respect them. We shift our weight, unlock our knees, arrange our bodies in the best way for each of us. For an instant, most of us are standing on one foot. We are not in a hurry. We are not dreaming. We are ready to give up everything, even our lives. We shall do it without violence, because that is our conviction. What we want is freedom. What we want is the power to determine our destiny. As my left foot comes down, it is coordinated with my right, and they match the equivalent movement of those who have joined me and with whom I am joining. We are firmly rooted. Whenever possible, we let our limbs swing in a natural motion and keep our heads facing forward. What we want is the complete elimination of military forces, not just from this or that territory, but from every corner, every outpost on Earth. What we want is full and meaningful employment. What we want is decent, safe housing. What we want is an education that teaches us our true histories and their consequences on the present. As each of us lifts our right foot or makes the equivalent movement to ambulate, we are now a perfectly synchronized force, even in our differences and occasional disorder. What we want is an immediate stop to state brutality and the assassination of Black people and Native people and disabled people and trans people and women and children and mothers and fathers who can only do so much because they are shackled by the very state that seeks to kill them for having foolishly believed they were free. What we want are the doors flung open to Folsom, Rikers, Guantanamo, San Quentin, San Juan de Lurigancho, ADX Florence, Supermax, La Sabaneta, Attica, Camp 22, Polesmore. It would be fatal to overlook the urgency of the moment. As we advance, we are a thunderous thrum. Some of us will run under the rain in Seattle and toward traffic to block Lakeshore Drive in Chicago. Others will flood Wall Street, and more will storm the port of Oakland. There will be one lonely soul in snowy Bethel, Alaska, and clusters in Little Rock, in sweltering Ferguson, in Tallahassee and Flagstaff, Baltimore, Detroit, Honolulu, Boise, in ancient Salem, Wichita, and Northampton, Oklahoma City, and Spearfish, South Dakota. And always on the Mall in Washington, always on the Green, always in the bitter cold that is Pennsylvania Avenue. Nerve and muscle adapt to the rhythmic stimulus of our own noise, the noise we make together. It is true that when, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one person to connect to another, and another, and another, in order to defend our equality, our difference, our dependence on one another, then. So that's Achi. And she says that much of the text here is adapted from the Black Panthers' 10-point program, the Delano Manifesto, Equalize It, a Disability Manifesto, Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, Trail of Broken Treaties, the Trans-Feminist Manifesto, and the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America. So it was sort of a what would you call that? A mashup. A mashup of voices and manifestos. I think it's pretty terrific. Anyway, now I'm going to read my sort of quieter pieces. So, the day after the election, I took a walk, and at the time I just thought, what's the best we can hope for? Maybe that we can somehow manage to flourish somehow. So that this poem, sort of very short poem, has that idea in back of it, called 2016 Post-Election Walk in the Desert Upon Fearing We Had Lost Everything. This narrow desert path, like life, I think. The habit of metaphor crops up annoyingly, but I can't transform the light into anything other than it is, sharpening the tips of things. A consolation to count holes pocking the ground to creep into certain times of year, like now, and rocks everywhere to hurl, composing mountains, the Catalinas and the Rincons, still there. The sky's true blueness still there, a pile of desiccated brush, all silver webs and branches, hides a pale thumb-sized barrel cactus that managed to find shade enough to flourish in. Correction, that tries to flourish in the shade. And this is called Imminence, and this is the piece that's on the broadside. That broadside was made by Ander Monson, and it's just a beautiful, regardless of whether you like the words or not. It's a beautiful piece of art. Imminence. Red, and this is from my book Monsters, and it's actually a little prose piece. Red-shouldered hawk sits on a wire waiting for the doves which he will kill. We sit in the car watching the hawk await its prey. Red-shouldered hawk, very stationary, very beautiful, very noble, with a bold slice of orangey red on each shoulder. We light cigarettes and observe. We observe the spaces in the sky which are empty. We observe the smoke filling the car's interior like an image, such as the hawk fills the caverns of our imaginations. With our usual composure, we observe the ruthlessness of nature, one creature about to swoop upon another. Red-shouldered hawk snaps his head to the left. In the distance, the tender clamor of doves about to descend. Is all life so misguided, we wonder? We light fresh cigarettes. The real show is about to begin. Thank you.
If you're a poet, or if you are a prose writer, we have not stopped accepting submissions for Truth to Power. In fact, right now we are reading submissions online for our online equivalent, or a sequel, as it were, to Truth to Power. And you are welcome to go to www.cutthroatmag.com. Don't just go to Cutthroat, or you're going to go to a casino, and don't blame me if you lose all your money. Go to cutthroatmag.com. And we're especially looking for, if you know any teenage writers, we have a special page. We are going to set aside a specific number of pages for our teenage writers. So if you have anybody in your family, or if you teach school, please spread this around. Or if you have any contacts with the schools in Tucson, we'd be delighted, to have some young voices represented in our publication. So our next reader without further ado, is Allison Hawthorne Deming, who I know from a long time work teaching in Prague and also reading here, first at the Botanical Gardens a long time ago with you. And I admire Allison's writing, and I also admire her work, her environmental work. And she's also a poet and an essay writer. Her most recent books are Stairway to Heaven, Penguin Poets 2016, Zoologies, On Animals and the Human Spirit and Death Valley, Planted Light, a collaboration with photographer Stephen Strom. A 2015 Guggenheim Fellow, Deming is Agnes Neem's, I'm going to have to put my glasses on, Howry Chair in Environment and Social Justice at the University of Arizona. Letter to America, which she's going to read tonight, was first published in Terrain.org, a wonderful magazine here in Tucson.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, everybody who made this happen. Well, we write, right? No matter what happens, that's what we try to do. And it helps. We don't always know how. Dear America, I wrote this a couple of days after the election. The heat is just beginning to wane here in Arizona, in the November ending the hottest 5 years on record. I've had to adjust my inner thermostat to living here in terrain associated in many of the world's religions with spiritual testing. The election results threaten to undermine every cause that I, as an educator, poet, and essayist, have worked for in the past 50 years. Women's rights, civil rights, environmental justice, science literacy, civil discourse, and empathy. And underlying all, the informed and reflective thinking required for democracy to thrive. Only 25% of the American electorate voted for Donald Trump. That means 75% of Americans did not vote for deportation of Mexicans, banning of Muslims, denigrating and denying science, wasting this glorious planet for the sake of personal and corporate gain, hate speech, racist and misogynist words and deeds, or autocratic decision-making. The reasons that only 25% of Americans voted for Hillary Clinton will become more clear within